they really like to pull information out of you, and that was kind of the break you down part of it. And so we would have these like group therapy sessions, and they weren't conducted by a licensed therapist or a licensed anybody. They had these kind of counselors with these certifications that, you know, any moron, frankly, could go online and get within a matter of a few hours. And, you know, they would have these young women in public groups, like just talk and pull information out of them about being sexually abused, about being harassed. I mean, things you should not be sharing in a group setting, particularly with like other young men.
Welcome to OTR, Over the Rainbow, Achieving Mental Health for Real. This podcast offers hope to many people who needlessly suffer from mental health issues. Your host, Bob Adelman, brings you information on how you can recover from any mental health issue and achieve a happier life. If you want to know more, please check out his trailer. Bob's notes on today's show follows.
Meet Dr. Cory Jentry, the author of Selling Sanity, The Troubled Teen Industry, The Insane Profits, and the Kids Who Pay the Price. A survivor himself with a Ph.D. in political science from the London School of Economics, Cory talks about his rough upbringing and his experience at a troubled teen program. He exposes how troubled teen programs marketed as help often cause lasting harm. Today, Cory helps families, educators, and advocates spot red flags, protect kids, and push for real reform, giving listeners the tools to understand and challenge the systems that endanger vulnerable youth. Cory Jentry is a strategic powerhouse at the intersection of healthcare innovation, luxury brand marketing, and organizational leadership. As founder of the Asclepius Group and Jentry Consulting Services, Cory has spent over 7 years architecting transformative growth strategies for clients across healthcare, education, and high-end automotive sectors.
Now, here's Bob with today's show.
Hello, and welcome to OTR. Cory, how are you today?
I'm doing great, and thanks so much for having me on, Bob.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure having you here. Could you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Dr. Cory Jentry. I'm a triple master's Ph.D. from the London School of Economics, and I'm also a survivor of 5 years in a troubled teen treatment program from the time I was 15 until I was 20. And then after that, I went away and did my education. And unlike a lot of other people that just kind of end up going through these treatment programs, I was, I don't know if I was curious enough or stupid enough. It's one of the two, and I can't figure out which one, but I'll let you know at a later time. I decided to go back into the treatment world, this time not as a client, but as a business consultant. So I worked in the teen and adult mental health, behavioral health, and addiction treatment field for about the last 5 or 6 years as a business consultant and case consultant for these programs. And out of that, I saw a lot of the abuse and scandal and negligence that was taking place in the behavioral health community, and decided to write my book about it, which is Selling Sanity, which is my kind of memoir and journalistic investigation of the troubled teen treatment world and the economics behind it, the ecosystem, and sort of the emotional and mental turmoil that it causes a lot of kids.
I gotcha. As a mental health program, I always ask this question: how was your environment when you were growing up? I know you eventually went to this school, but before that, how was your childhood growing up?
Yeah, it's a great question, Bob. And my childhood growing up was, it was hell. I don't know a better way to kind of describe it, but I grew up in just outside of Augusta, Georgia, in a very rural community there, and my family was quite economically disenfranchised. So my mother was very mentally ill. She had bipolar disorder on top of a variety of other things. And she was just, sick all the time, constantly going in and out of mental institutions, trying to kill herself. She was quite physically and emotionally abusive to my brother and I growing up, as well as my my sister, and my poor father, despite being completely ill-equipped to raise kids to begin with, he kind of got a lot more than he bargained for. He had three kids then that were pretty troubled. I was a emotionally disturbed kid, and part of that was probably growing up very poor, and the other part of it was probably had something to do with the fact that my mother was very mentally ill and was quite explosive and often unstable, I think is a good way of describing it. So she would, just constant up and down. So my dad just really wasn't there. He kind of escaped the way I think a lot of men do. He just was like, well, I'm going to put my head down and work my ass off, quite frankly. So my dad sort of just indulged in chronic workaholism, and that was to, support his family, to just kind of keep us in clothes and everything. And then the other part of it was just to kind of stay away from my insane mother.
Wow.
My insane mother.
Did they actually do any type of abuse as far as hitting you or calling you names or anything like that?
Oh yeah, I mean, growing up, my mother was born in Italy actually, but raised in Toms River, New Jersey. So she came from a very staunchly Catholic family and Italian upbringing. So she, for a tiny little 5'2" Italian woman, she had superhuman strength. So there was a lot of and she had she should have played for the Yankees. She had a pitching arm and could find our bodies.
Oh my God! With
objects in a very sophisticated way. So she was lots of throwing and yelling and screaming and name calling. And then my father, most of the time when he'd get home, she would just climb all over him and start, your kids did this and your kids did that. So we got kind of the blunt force of my father's wrath when he came home. So it was just a very there was a lot of emotional and psychological abuse, but some physical abuse as well. And it was just unstable. It was one of those environments where as a young kid, you had to learn pretty quickly how to read the emotional temperature in the room as soon as you walked in. So if it was a good day, then you could your shoulders could relax a little bit. And it was like, okay, maybe we can get a snack or go play in the yard and have some fun. But there were other days where, you walked in and you just kind of knew, okay, it's going to be one of those days.
You had two siblings?
Yeah, I have a younger brother who is about 18 months younger than me. And then I have a younger sister that's like 6 years younger than me. And we all, we're kind of, my sister and I were obviously separated by a fairly large age gap. So there wasn't a lot of relating and stuff going on there.
Did you try to protect your sister at all, or it was pretty much
yeah, there was definitely, being the eldest, there was a component of feeling like a lot of responsibility on my shoulders, in terms of feeling like it was up to me to help keep the family together in some ways, to help kind of hold things together. There was an element of I didn't want my brother or sister to kind of catch the wrath of my mother, so I would, do what I could to try and keep things in line there. And then that, of course, sparked all kinds of sibling rivalry between me and my brother and my sister, because, all the like, you're not my parent and this and that kind of stuff. So it was, it was really quite volatile.
How were you outside the house? Were you a bully at all, or were you?
Oh, no, I was, where we grew up, was very rural, and we, it was kind of the joke around the neighborhood and stuff. It was like, oh, we just good old trailer trash, It was kind of just the nomenclature that was used, but we were quite poor in a already quite poor area, and we were also the neighborhood in the area and the schools that we grew up in. It was predominantly African American, so it was a lot of kind of rural. It's very commonplace in the South. You have these kind of rural poor areas that are, very, very economically depressed. And they tend to be, mostly, minority families, and then, some, lower class white families like myself. So the, African American kids did not like,
No.
the poor white kids. So
Right.
and there were still a lot of, in the rural South, they're still fighting
Hmm.
battles from the Civil War in a
Right.
lot of ways,
Yes.
and kind of reconciling with that. So there was a lot of hate across the aisle. There was a lot of, racism and prejudice in my family. I certainly experienced a lot of reverse racism and prejudice from a lot of the kids that I grew up with, a lot of being bullied. And I was also just very not designed for the Southeast. I took after my mother. I was this kind of skinny, awkward, very smart. I did very well in school and stuff, just kind of naturally. I was very fortunate in that respect. But in the area that I grew up in, it was, that was not something that was valued a lot. So I got the shit kicked out of me a lot for, kind of being the smartest person in the room. And then, I was this skinny, lanky kid, with, a bunch of these just like really huge, everybody played football and basketball, and they were all quite athletic, and just these, big corn-fed farm boys.
Wow.
So I kind of caught the wrath of a lot of different people, and I learned how to take a lot of punches. I'll just put it that way.
Wow.
Put it that way. So
That's god awful. Yeah. Wow.
yeah.
Hard to
And
hear
then,
that.
of course, women and stuff like that, I was just completely,
Yeah.
useless at talking to girls
Mhm.
or anything like that. So it was,
Did you have any impairments at all, like ADHD or anything like that?
yeah, there were some, slight learning disabilities that I had. And then I did inherit a lot of my, just genetically and probably growing up in the environment that I did. I was an extremely anxious kid.
Mhm.
So, keeping my attention, initially they thought it was, ADHD and stuff. But at that time, my, those types of medications, and it was just a very different time then. This was like the
Oh, yeah.
80s,
Right.
early 90s. So, just the medication, and we didn't know what we didn't know back then.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrible. I mean, when I grew up in the 70s or before that, there was absolutely nothing. My parents did nothing for me. And I had some
Oh, yeah.
serious issues. I had terrible OCD, rituals out the gazoo, everything. And there was nothing. And that's one of the reasons I have this broadcast, is because I don't want that to happen again. I mean, the horror of trying, to make sense out of senseless suffering. It was awful, But
Oh, God, yeah.
my parents were like angels compared to yours. I mean, the worst we had was my father, who was totally unpredictable. So you had to read the room, like you said. If my father came in a room and he was pissed, you knew it instantly.
Oh, yeah.
Instantly, just
Oh, yeah.
instantly, and you hid and covered your head because he was going to come after somebody, and you didn't want it to be you. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But it wasn't all the time, and he didn't hit us. He did degrade us sometimes, but I don't think he meant it. He just was that way. But yeah, it was god awful, and it sounds like you had a hard time too, because you didn't even have a childhood. I had a great childhood. I ignored my parents and just had a childhood. I played friends and all that kind of stuff. But then the story leads to what your book is about, pretty much. They decided to send you somewhere or put you in a special program. What was that all about?
Yeah. So about the time I was, growing up in the Southeast and kind of like the rural areas that I was in, particularly if you don't have any money, there's not really a whole hell of a lot to do out. And I mean, I know now you spent time in the Greenville area, so that kind of area. I mean, outside of the sort of small urban areas, if you can even call them that, in the Southeast, there's not a whole hell of a lot to do in those places. So we, did what all kids did. And I, thrived in school and all of that stuff. But then when I was, 12, 13, puberty kicked in and all, your whole world just, as a young man anyway, your whole world just starts changing. I started noticing women for the first time, and you want to fit in socially, and I started becoming painfully aware of our socioeconomic situation, and a lot of things that are just really damaging for young kids growing up, particularly when you're poor. Is one, it's as a white person in the Southeast, growing up, when I did in the kind of racial environments that I was in, there was this kind of feeling of, well, this shouldn't be us, so there was this kind of moral conundrum of like, oh, well, what's wrong with your family that you all are poor and kind of living amongst all these other poor people. And then there was a major religious component to it. My family had kind of converted to Protestantism and more fundamentalist forms of Christianity. So, between the abuse and stuff that I was getting at home and then going to, these kind of hellfire and brimstone churches, it was just utterly terrifying. And when I was, 12 or 13 years old, I started doing what all the kids in my neighborhood were doing. We started, stealing beers and stuff here and there, drinking, going out and flirting with girls, started smoking cannabis and stuff like that. And it was, just kind of what every kid that I knew was doing at that time, whether they were, the valedictorian or, just kind of some bum floating through. We all kind of did the same things and went to the same little parties out in the woods and, did all of that stuff. And around that time, I started feeling a fair bit of camaraderie with individuals for the first time in my life around using substances and stuff. It was just something that like you could all kind of relate on, it was like having a beer or doing this or doing that. Looking back on it, it was just a social lubricant for teenage angst. But I think it was the combination of the, culture and the religious fundamentalism, because within the Pentecostal church, there was like no drinking, no anything. So, and my parents really kind of adopted that fundamentalist ideology. And so when I found alcohol and drugs, it was just something that kind of took a little bit of the edge off, and again was like a social lubricant for me to talk to women or have friends and have something to just kind of relate and talk to about. And when I was 15, a friend of mine who we would do these things with, and at that time it was on weekends, mostly after school and stuff. And it was very benign behavior looking back on it. It was what all teenagers do. We all, you drink or you experiment with stuff, you get in trouble, you do stupid things and get caught doing stupid things. So it was all pretty par for the course. And a friend of mine who was definitely, we were all pretty troubled. And a good friend of mine who was very troubled, named Kenneth. It wasn't that he was troubled. He just, I think everybody has friends like this, Bob, where
I know.
He's just, we called him like the resident fuck up. Forgive me for saying it that way, but he was just kind of anything that could happen, it was going to happen to Kenneth. And if he did anything, it was like, you're going to get caught. So we don't know why you're doing this. So he was just that guy.
Right.
And he got caught, sneaking in or out of his house. I can't remember which one it was, but he got caught for the God knows how many times sneaking out. And his parents sent him away to this treatment program called Insight. And he was gone for a few days, and then he sort of showed up back at school one day, and he was skipping around and seemed very happy. And we were all like, "Oh my God, what happened?" We wanted to get the dirt on what happened. His parents caught him. We were like, "Oh, Kenneth, you're such a fuck up! Like you got in trouble again. Where did they send you to this time?" And he was very happy and enthusiastic, very enthusiastic about this treatment program that he went to. And he was telling me all about it and some of our friends one morning before homeroom, when everyone's just hanging out before the bell rings. And he kept talking about how beautiful the women were. And there were all these, rich kids, and it was over in the very swanky part of town. So we lived in a little suburb called Grovetown, Georgia, which is where all the trailer parks and all of that stuff was. It was the closest little village to the military base. And then Augusta was, this really kind of bougie, the Masters golf tournament was there. It was where all the like rich people lived and stuff. So, he was going to these support meetings with this treatment program in like the ritzy side of town. And he just kept talking about how attractive the women were. He was like, man, we went to this house last night. It was like bigger than my yard. And we were all like, oh man, let's. And he had me with the girls. He was like, oh my God, there's like 15 or 20 just beautiful, women there, and they all want you to ride with them and hang out, and they tell you they love you. And I was like, I am going to this meeting with you. What? And it was pretty clever looking back on it, because the treatment program, they really knew what they were doing, as most of these programs do. They really kind of feed on the attraction part of it. So they like having kids that are in the school systems or this or that. They're almost seen as like ambassadors, or kind of very similar to what church outreach does, where they'll have almost like missionaries that come out, and their job is to kind of recruit people. That was definitely the impetus of the treatment program there.
What was was there a charge for this? Was it
supposed
to be charity or? No.
Yeah, this was in 1997. And I think at the time my treatment was for 12 weeks of outpatient, and it was like $8,000 or $9,000.
Oh my God. How did poor people afford that?
It's a great question. I mean, I showed up to this meeting with Kenneth after he sort of sold me on all the hot blondes and, this and that. And, these, gorgeous counselors came walking up to me, and, all these, he was right. There were all these like really attractive young women. And
yeah. They're all smiling. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And they were all on fire for this program. And they were like, we used to say like, oh, they've got the light.
Shiny, happy people, right?
Yeah. And we're hugging and kissing and like, oh, we love you, and you're going to ride in our car tonight. And then I sat down with the counselors, and they just spoke really candidly about how they love doing drugs and this and that. And I thought, oh man, like, yeah. And I wanted they were cool, and I wanted them to think I was cool. So
they love doing drugs.
Well, that's what they said. They were like, oh, we love doing drugs, and we used to do this and
These
that,
were
but
the
now
counselors?
we're sober.
The counselors said that?
Yeah. And they were like, but now we're sober, and we,
they used to love it. Okay.
Love being sober even more, and all of this. And, so I talked to them, and then they said, like, they told me how much it was going to cost. And I was like, there's no effing way that my parents can afford anything like that. And they were like, well, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. And they talked to my parents, and like a week or so went by, because I think there was a lot of stuff that, quite frankly, my parents had to get in order. But they, I'll give them credit. They scared the hell out of my parents. And they were like, look, your kid's going to die unless we help him. And I remember my dad sitting me down after and was really upset with me, but also really concerned, because he was like, you idiot, I didn't know that you were doing all of this stuff. So it was just kind of a big whirlwind. And I think through a combination of my parents just borrowing and stealing what they could, and then some scholarships from these like wealthy Jewish families in Atlanta that were very connected to the program. The next thing I knew, I was going into this treatment program, and it was, at the time when I was 15, it was like, in a lot of ways, it was like a dream come true. They told us that we could drop out of school, which was like a total, salvation to me. Cause even though I did well academically in school, I just hated it. And, it was a source of just me getting beat up or bullied or made fun of, or, it was just misery. So they were like, yeah, you can drop out of school. And they had all these caveats. It was like, now that you're in the group, you just hang out with us.
How long were you in this group?
From 15 to 20.
Okay.
And, and I mean, while we were in there, it was interesting, because looking back on it now, I kind of unpacked some of my childhood and what that was like and all of that. And, they didn't ask me any questions about my childhood. They didn't ask me any questions about my history. They didn't do any kind of like in-depth psychiatric evaluation on me. They didn't, test to see if I was depressed or if I had anxiety or ADHD, anything. In fact, they were very, acrimonious towards any kind of traditional psychiatry therapy or medicine. So any kind of psychiatric medication was completely forbidden. They didn't let you talk to or see anyone outside of the group that wasn't a group counselor. So any kind of psychiatry or therapist that was not in their cohort, it was completely forbidden. And then they had all these other rules, like with relapse, which, anytime you're working with broody teenagers in any kind of behavioral health or addiction capacity, there are going to be relapses. I mean, it's just a part of the landscape.
Relapses, they catch them taking drugs again.
Relapse is like they'll go and take drugs, or, they'll drink, or they'll, for some behavioral health episodes, it could mean like engaging in certain kind of destructive behaviors or thought patterns. Sometimes with like schizophrenics, for instance, they'll have like you could consider it like a psychotic relapse, but it's like a flare up of psychotic episodes. So like delusions or hallucinations, auditory sounds, paranoid scenarios, things like that. It's all very common, particularly with teenagers nowadays, and not nowadays, but anytime, because they're very much developing at that point. So your brain chemistry is not stable. Your physiology isn't stable. Everything's kind of just in developmental mode. Your brain is like functioning at peak capacity, and your body and neurochemical systems are constantly like changing and altering. So it's and you have hormones just pulsing through your entire body. So it's in general, it's a trying time for any young human that's going through that period. But you factor in some substance abuse and behavioral health disorders, and it's just par for the course. So I did have a few relapses, and I got caught smoking weed a few times, and a lot of it again was just it was peer pressure. It was the normal kind of teenage things of, I want to fit in. I want these people to like me. There was almost always a girl involved where she was like, oh, I'm going to this party and there's going to be booze. And, as a 16-year-old, you're not going to try and go to this party. So, those things, but in the group, it was very punitive. So they didn't talk about it in most substance use programs. Today, at least the halfway decent ones, they do view relapses. It's not something that everybody celebrates, but it's like, okay, this happened. What can we learn from it? And how can we kind of move on? But there it was very shame-based. So every time there was a slip, they wouldn't call it a relapse. They would say, you bailed on us. So it was really like, you let the group down, you let us down. They would use a lot of things like, we're very disappointed in you. And then for the monetary side of it, they used it as a big, oh, well, you need to send your son to this rehab again, or you need to send us here again. So it was very much a like, oh, this is a kind of an upsell opportunity. Although at the time I didn't see it that way. Looking back on it now, that's completely what it was.
They didn't really preach any kind of religion or ritual that you had to do. It was just about keeping you there so they can re-enlist you. Is that what they were trying?
Yeah, keeping you there so they could enlist you, and also indoctrinate you, because a lot of those they're called behavior modification programs now, looking back on it. And the troubled teen industry is a big and diverse industry, and there are some very good evidence-based, like healthy programs out there that deal with troubled teens and are very effective at doing so. And then there are some other programs that tend to fall into the more punitive, like what we call behavior modification. So they tend to take on like therapeutic boarding schools. Wilderness programs are another one that people hear a lot about, and they use a lot of flowery language and stuff to kind of doll it up. But the real basis of those kind of behavior mod programs is they want to break you down psychologically enough to where you kind of become compliant. Is really the I liken it to, they get someone to shut up by duct taping their mouth closed, and eventually you're going to stop trying to scream. But it's effective for what it is, but eventually when you take the tape off, they're going to have something to say.
What were some of the dark things that they did? Did they do any of those really immoral
Oh, well, I can give you so many examples. There were a lot of, they really like to pull information out of you. And that was kind of the break you down part of it. And, so we would have these like group therapy sessions, and they weren't conducted by a licensed therapist or a licensed anybody. They had these kind of counselors with these certifications that, any moron, frankly, could go online and get within a matter of a few hours. And they were leading these groups. And, it was like a group of my outpatient. I think there were like 6 or 7 people in the outpatient, and it was young men, young women between, I think the youngest was like 12 or 13. And the oldest was, 17, maybe close to 18. And, they would have these young women in public groups, like just talk and pull information out of them about being sexually abused, about being harassed. Things you should not be sharing in a group setting, particularly with like other young men.
And did you think they got off on that? Is that why
yeah,
they were doing that?
It was a way for them to just exert control over you. And as soon as they broke you down and you started crying, it was almost like they got you. And as soon as you hit that point, that was when they'd really come in and start being like, oh my God, we love you so much. And like, you're so brave for doing this. And there was a part of you that was like, hey, F off. I didn't want or need to say this. But then it was really strange because I remember talking about some things that happened to me when I was, a very young child, and stuff with my mother, and there was some cousins and relatives that really did physical harm to me when I was a kid. And I was talking about my mother and how, some of the horrible things that she would say, because it was regularly like, we're going to send you away to adoption, or, you were a mistake, and, we don't love you, all of this stuff. And I remember these counselors trying to just pull all of this stuff out of me in a public setting, which I was very uncomfortable with doing. And finally, I just started like breaking down and crying, and really had a bit of a psychotic break looking back on it. But I just really kind of fell apart in the office, and they looked at me after, and they were like, you chose all of this. So it was essentially like after they got me to say all of the information, then everything was like, this is your choice. So it was all about personal empowerment. And they were like, this is you. You chose this family. You chose these circumstances to live in. And like, you just need to learn how to make different choices. And that's what we're here to teach you how to do. And that was kind of consistent language with, women that talked about being raped or sexually molested by relatives or family members or parents. Really, really, really inappropriate things. And, there was just this indoctrination of personal responsibility. So, they would be like, you chose that, and this is your.
What did they mean you chose it? Are they talking about reincarnation or something? How could you possibly choose
it wasn't like
things?
Reincarnation. It was like, it was very, the best way to describe it is I remember this one young woman, this sort of epitomizes it just perfectly. She was talking about, a lot of sexual, abuse and harassment and even rape that she had experienced. And, the counselors, I'll never forget this. One of the male counselors in there, talked to her and just broke this poor woman down. She was maybe 14 or 15 years old at the time, and just broke this poor woman down. And it was essentially like, well, if you wouldn't act like such a slut, then, none of this stuff would have happened to you. And
You actually said slut?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Like really, they could be very crass and aggressive with the language, because the psychology behind it was like, again, it was just to inflict the most emotional damage on you that they could, to kind of break you down.
Now, at what point did you panic and tell your parents, this is bad, I want to get out?
No, because I know this sounds a bit twisted, but as terrible as it was in there, it was still better than what it was in my my parents' home. And they were quite sophisticated too at kind of turning everybody against their parents, which in my case, it wasn't very hard to do. But in some other cases, there were people that had really close family ties, and they'd be like, basically anything that was in competition for like your top attention other than the group, it had to go. And then there was a figurehead that was kind of the cult leader of it. His name was Bob Meehan, and he he's now passed, but his son-in-law is still very much alive and well, and his name's Clint Stonebreaker, and they're still around. And it was like the doctrine of Bob is what we used to call it, because this man would like walk into the room and people would literally fall on the floor and sit at his feet and be like, "Hey, Bob, can you just tell me what?" He was really seen as this sort of savior figure. And the whole treatment program, everything really revolved around what Bob said. So if Bob said that, you being raped was your fault, that was essentially like God coming down from the sky and being like, "Hey, you shouldn't, that was on you." So it really exerted a lot of emotional control. And also they were really good at convincing you that you were just nothing without them. And I remember once I got into the outpatient, they really were good at like seducing you in with a lot of love, a lot of attention, things that are just very seductive to a teenager. It's like all you want is recognition and acceptance and to feel like you belong somewhere. So they gave you that in quite a really nice package. But then there were all of a sudden all these conditions that were contingent in order for you to keep on doing that. So you just had to abide by what they said. And for me, when I came in, after I talked to them about, some of my drug experimentation and all of that. And a lot of it was just, made up or exaggerated because I was a 15-year-old kid and I had no money and no access to anything. So, a lot of it was just complete hyperbole. But they started talking about like, they would say things a lot like, "Man, you are so fucked up. Do you know how fucked up you are?"
And they use that kind of words.
Oh yeah, they use that. Pardon my language, but this is the exact terminology that they would use. To a 15-year-old, and particularly we were living in a trailer. My family was completely broke. My mother was trying to kill herself like pretty regularly. My father was just never there. So it wasn't hard for me to connect the dots and be like, "Oh yeah, my life sucks, man." Wow. I can totally admit to that.
And are these people regulated in any way? Like, are there people that go in and inspect them or anything like that?
You would think so, but over the years, it's kind of interesting because I was there for 5 years, and then all of a sudden we got, and while you're in there, you can't have contact with anybody. They didn't want you to go anywhere, do anything. It was just be with the group. And then all of a sudden they were like, "Hey, we think you're ready to graduate." And we were all kind of like, "What the hell is this mean? Like, we've never heard of this before." And we went from kind of consistently being there for years to getting pushed out within like, I think it was within a month, we were all out and graduated. So everybody was, or cohorts of us were out and graduated. And we found out later on, a few years later after we got out of the cult, that it was actually being investigated by the federal authorities for being a cult. So Bob and a lot of his folks were coming under a lot of heavy scrutiny because of, their behavior and a lot of bad behaviors. So at that time, the feds did start looking into it, but I mean, it's a big problem. It was a big problem then, and it's still a big problem now that it is such an under-regulated field. And you would think that they would have things like, the equivalent of secret shoppers, or even what they do in restaurants, where they'll have health inspectors that just kind of pop in and say, "Hey, we're here to see how things are going." That doesn't really exist.
Well, it's the poor. It's the poor. So who cares about the poor? That's
well, and it's either seen as like the poor, or with a lot of these private programs, which oddly enough tend to be the more troublesome ones. Programs like the VA, or like LA County Department of Mental Health, or New York Department of Mental Health. They actually are like very regulated, and they have a fair bit of oversight, and the clinicians are very well trained. They're actually really good examples of what good community-based mental health care should look like when it's administered. But the private programs that are cash pay or utilize commercial insurance, there's little, if zero, regulation on them. So it's kind of an interesting thing. Even though I was very poor, I was in this treatment center with kids that were exceptionally wealthy. I mean, there was a kid that I went to school, and that was kind of the weird thing about it, is I remember going to kids' homes and hanging out with them in the group, and their living room was bigger than my entire trailer. And so they really targeted like middle and upper middle class families. And I was very lucky, I guess, because my parents just begged, borrowed, and stole whatever they, could. And I got some assistance from these Jewish families in Atlanta. They, were able to kind of get me in, but it also became very clear in the group that they did not, and I mean, Bob and the counselors would even say this. They were like, we don't let poor people in here. We don't let ugly people in here. We don't let fat people in here. We don't allow black people. He would use a different
black people as well. I mean,
he would use a different adjective to describe them, but it was very, very.
Oh, come on! Really?
It was very, very waspy, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and oddly enough, they were also very secular. So I think because Bob thought he was God, and Clint, they both think they are gods, that they didn't want to have any competition with the with any of the other religions. So I came in with very strong religious beliefs, and I remember sitting in like multiple sessions with the counselors, and they would call it deprogramming, where they would just, be like, all of that is BS, and like, you can't believe any of it. That's all nonsense. And, you just have to listen to us. And they would use like a blend of a lot of kind of new age spirituality, pseudoscience terminology with like some nuggets of Zen Buddhism or this or that here.
And nobody regulates them. They're completely on their own. They can do whatever they want with our children. And the parents are clueless, right? Parents are clueless. Is that what you're saying? That have no idea.
Some of the parents in there, I mean, for parents like mine, I can speak lucidly about my experience, but I mean, I was already a troubled kid. Like I was a messed up kid, under the best of circumstances. I was a troubled teen without any substances or anything like that. And then, you take that, and again, with my father, my mother was just completely absent and non-functional. And my dad was just, honestly, I think he was just working so he didn't have to deal with anything, which is what, men of that generation did. It was just like, put your head down, stiff upper lip, and,
as bad as work was, this was worse. So they went to work.
Yeah. And, so my parents were kind of like, look, I hated my parents, and quite frankly, I think my parents hated me. So they were glad to just, they were like, look, you guys want to deal with him? Fine, you deal with him. And over the years, after 20 something, almost 30 years of working in one way or another in the behavioral health space in the United States and abroad, that with a lot of troubled teens and their families, there's already quite a bit of acrimony between the kids and their parents. And, usually there's been a lot of stuff that's going on. And, a lot of times the parents are like, look, I am just done with this kid. So like, if you want to take him and
so you're saying
do what you like
a
with
lot
him,
of parents just don't care. They don't care anymore.
It's not that they don't care. I think it's just a combination of frustration and desperation. And after a certain point, because the behavioral health landscape, particularly in America, is so opaque and it's so complicated and unregulated that it's easy to get sold a bad bill of goods. And also they're quite sophisticated in the way that they go about messaging it, because I don't know exactly what they told my parents, but after almost 30 years of kind of sitting and hearing what these type and researching and writing books about how these programs operate, I can guarantee you that the conversation probably went something like this. It was like, hey, your kid's got a chronic illness. He's, using drugs and doing things that you have no idea about. And he's going to die. Like your child is going to die unless you let us help him, and we can help him. And, to a family that's desperate and frustrated and angry, and you hear a calm, soothing voice that's like, hey, we can help. And it's for this low price of, whatever. Yeah. As much as my parents disliked me and I disliked them at the time, they didn't want me to die, and I don't know any parent that would. So they did what any parent would do, which is whatever they could do for their kid. Right. And I think a lot of families find themselves in that type of situation again and again and again. And, a calm voice and a steady hand in a time of distress, even if they're completely full of shit, it can seem like a beacon or a way out. So a lot of families, including mine, are just like, yep, sure, whatever. Yeah. And you take care of it. And there's not really, unfortunately, a lot of state or federal oversight or bodies that can kind of come in and check on these places and see, actually what they're doing and how it's performing or not performing.
Yeah, you take this problem and you add foster care to it. I mean, the children are in trouble. And so is there a pathway to helping? First of all, is this exclusive to the South, or is this all over the country?
Oh, God, no. I mean, as I said before, that the one program that I was involved in, which is one of, Bob and Clint, Bob's now passed, but Clint's alive and doing very well. But these programs have, really proliferated. They actually didn't start in the South. And oddly enough, the Southeast, they've had a little bit harder time pushing into the Southeast, just one, because there's, not to speak ill of the South, it's my home and where I'm from, but there's not nearly as much money in the Southeast as there is in like big urban areas, for instance, like New Jersey, New York, California, places like where all the money's at, or, in South Florida. But they have just this one organization had programs and still has programs in Georgia, Alabama, St. Louis, Colorado. They had some programs in Texas. So they're, all over the country.
How many kids would you estimate are affected by this?
Oh, millions of kids.
Millions of our children are being abused right now.
They're either being abused or undertreated, mistreated, right. Misdiagnosed is like really bad, because a lot of these programs like mine, again, I came in with a litany of issues and a lot of stuff that just good old fashioned therapy and, probably some kind of basic psychiatry would have moved mountains for me.
Right. You did it yourself, so they could have done that for you.
Yeah. I kind of went through the ringer to get there, but but a lot of these programs, particularly now, because there's a lot of money in it, because the Affordable Care Act, since that came out in 2007, it requires insurance companies to cover behavioral health, which is a great thing. Like, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but unfortunately, the industry and the market behind the industry has kind of outpaced the ethics and efficacy of the industry. So a lot of these like private equity backed treatment programs and stuff, they're really just hiring the lowest common denominator that they can get away with, because everybody just wants to scale these days. So everybody's like, oh, let's just build more and bigger. Right. They're not really thinking about the quality of the care.
It's all about money. It's all about money.
Yeah, they want it's just I call it the bill baby bill philosophy. Right. It's just they want your insurance or whatever cash that you can come out of pocket of, so that they can take that and then house you. Because for them, it's all about average. In the treatment industry, we call it it's your average daily census, ADC, average daily census, and that any business owner, any treatment placement person, any marketer, anybody in the behavioral health industry, that's the only number they care about, because whatever your average daily census is, you're getting paid X amount or X thousands of dollars per day per patient. So, from an insurance company.
Wow.
So for like a teen in a mental health treatment program in California at a residential program, you can bet that most programs are getting about $1,200 to $1,300 a day for substance use or mental health treatment for like a teenager. And they all seek to have at least, depending on how big the programs are, but they all want to have average daily censuses of around, I think it's like 30 or 35 people in the cohort, because they know that that's where like the major profitability is. So they'll put anyone in there in those cases. It's like, they'll put schizophrenics with borderlines, which is like a big no-no. They'll have young women and young men in cohorts together. A lot of the groups and the therapy is being administered by people that aren't even licensed. A lot of the chief clinical officers or clinical directors, quotation marks, they're not even licensed clinicians. They're just these kind of sycophants. Almost all of them have been through AA or NAA or in recovery in some way, shape, or form. So which is fine, but there's nothing scientific or evidence-based about the 12-step recovery program.
Yeah.
So, and they're very kind of doctrinal and tend to err towards like anti-medication and anti-therapy. So it's not a cult, but there are certainly cult-like tendencies in the 12-step world.
Besides writing a book or going on podcasts and stuff like that, what can we do to change this or to make a dent or make a difference? What do we have to do to change this?
The thing I advocate the most for with families and what I do in my a lot of my like personal advocacy work and professional work is really educating educators and families and parents particularly on the kind of what to look out for, red flags, if you will, with these treatment programs. And I can't emphasize to your listeners or parents or counselors or anybody out there that's looking into these treatment programs or thinking of sending your child to these treatment programs. I'm not, and I hope it doesn't come off this way, I'm not anti-treatment, because there are some professionals out there that are doing really damn good work. Like really, they're changing lives and they're saving lives. But unfortunately, those are the exception, not the rule. Most of what is out there is just subpar at best. So what I tell families is I say, look, if you're going to send your kid to one of these programs, look into that program the way that you would look into a university that you were going to send your kid off to. Ask about the people that are treating him, ask about the doctors, look into the owners, look into their licensing, look into complaints that they've got, because these programs, if you do find yourself in a situation where you're looking into or thinking about sending your kid to this program, they are going to have so much more of a palatable impact on your child and their development than any school or university ever will. So you should look into them with all the rigor and discernment that you would of placing your kid in a school, because it's gonna shape them in ways that you can't even imagine. And then the other component is reporting. So for whatever reason, these programs and these program owners, they seem to just get away with shit constantly. And it's sort of mind-boggling to me, because it's almost like whack-a-mole, a game of whack-a-mole, because you report these organizations or these owners, and then after a few years, just like with anything else, the regulatory bodies are always very slow to kind of catch up with it. And then when they find the individuals that are kind of engaging in this abuse, they'll fine them a minuscule, amount of money after they've already made tens of millions off of a kind of fleecing
so there's
families.
No incentive to stop. None.
Yeah. So, and then they shut him down in one state. Like this happened with Bob. He was part of Bob and Clint. They were part of a big thing in Texas, back in like the 1970s and early 80s. Yeah. And it was a complete disaster, and people were dying and they were lying about a bunch of stuff. So the government came in and finally shut him down. And then they just moved to a different state. I think he just literally went across the border
He didn't
to
get arrested.
Arizona.
He didn't get any, nothing. He didn't get arrested. No.
And then he just opened up shop there, and everybody was like, "Oh, okay." And I see it time and time again, where someone will get in trouble in one state, like about 10 years ago, all the kind of naughty behavior was going on in South Florida. They called it the Rehab Riviera, and there were all these like sketchy programs and just lots of fraud and abuse and all kinds of stuff. And the state of Florida and the federal government kind of stepped in and were like, okay, this is ridiculous. We need to like clean house. There's all this fraud going on. And most of it was financially driven because the state realized that they were getting fleeced for like billions every year. And, but then everybody just shut up shop in South Florida and they all came to California. And then when California started cracking down, they've all moved to Texas, and then they go to places like Montana or, Washington State, New York. They just they're like gypsies almost. They just kind of.
Is there any group that is trying to fight against this at all, or it's pretty much an individual parent thing?
No, I mean, I'm part of a nonprofit that we're organizing called Compass, which is looking to really regulate and kind of act as a watchdog and rating agency to these types of programs, and really to kind of streamline the abuse and reporting process. But there are some other great programs and groups out there called Breaking Code Silence is a really, really well-known and very good program. There's a woman named Shoshana Walters, I believe her name is. She's a fantastic journalist, and she wrote a really phenomenal book called Rehab, The Great American Scandal. She's really writing and advocating about this and has worked with organizations like Breaking Code Silence. And, what my organization and what folks like Shauna and other advocates and journalists and researchers like ourselves are doing is, really just trying to get the message out there. And I wanted to write my book and share my story because I think it's important for men to share their stories. And unfortunately, with a lot of these survivor stories and these kind of trauma tragedies, for whatever reasons, it's overwhelmingly female narratives that are being produced. And I think that's great. And, I really admire and cannot say enough about people like Paris Hilton and other female advocates that have really stepped up and stepped out and really brought this into the spotlight. So I'm, in total admiration of her and what she's done and advocates like her. But I do think it's important because a lot of young men get really harmed, and a lot of it is irreparable harm by these programs. And I thought for myself and for a lot of the other young men that I know that have suffered and died, it was really important to share our perspective on the survivor story.
Tell us about the book. What's the name?
Oh, yeah. My book, it's called Selling Sanity, the Troubled Teen Industry, the Insane Profits, and the Kids Who Pay the Price.
And it's on Amazon and other places?
Available on Amazon and just about any online bookstore. There's a ebook version and a hard or a soft copy version, and then early next month I'll have a audio version out for people that are like me that are into audiobooks and such. So,
are there any links that you'd like to share?
Yeah, my consulting is Jentry, my last name, Jentry, consulting.com. And if any families or individuals need help or are in crisis and are having trouble with their kids, you can please reach out to me there. I provide treatment placement advice and I'll give you all the information that you need and what to look out for and all of that. And it's completely free. I know there are a lot of places that are doing a lot of this treatment placement stuff, and they're charging families like hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars just to find treatment placement for their kids. And it's, to me, that's rubbish, and people shouldn't be doing that. So I provide it completely free to families, and I also give them like what to look out for, questions that they need to ask, behind the scenes things that they need to ask about and look out for, different ways that they can advocate for their kids and for themselves. Because, a lot of these programs will yeah, they're not dumb if they're, or what is they're stupid as a fox, as they say. Like they know what they're doing, and their marketing and advertising, they've got it down to a fine science. And I speak lucidly about this because I used to be one of the people that helped get it down to a fine science. So I sort of know what goes on inside, and then I also know how the sausage gets made, as they say. So,
and what's the name of your website to get that service?
Yeah, it's gentryconsultingservices.com, or they can just.
I'll have it in the description of the program as well.
Yeah, or they can look me up at just CoryJentry.com. I have a few different websites, but I can be reached at either one of them. And I wrote the book and do the advocacy stuff that I do because in addition to wanting to tell like a male perspective of the survivor story, I also thought it was very important to connect my story to kind of a greater narrative and point to the kind of more macro problems that we have in the behavioral health space and some of the ways that we can start really advocating. Because I think at the end of the day, change really comes about when people start becoming aware of what's going on.
This is what this program's all about, to let people know what's going on, because a lot of people don't see it. Like parents don't see it. So we have to get this kind of valuable information. I was so glad that you wanted to come on the show and share this, because this is really important stuff. I don't think anyone wants their kids to go through this kind of horror. And it's not even close to being resolved. So we have to step up, and parents have to not just walk into this blindly, and they have to do the research and make sure the children are being taken care of properly. I mean, that's the least they can do. So I heavily recommend that they talk to someone, or they do the research themselves to make sure they go into the right place.
Yeah, 100%. And I always tell them to follow the money. That's always a good like who's paying you, where do you get paid from, who are the owners of these programs? Because one would think just logically that the ownership of these programs would be either medical doctors, psychiatrists, or therapists in some capacity, but
not Bob.
Far from it. Like I would say 80% of the programs that are out there are just owned by business guys or people that maybe went through a treatment program, and all of whom have money, by the way. They all come from like upper middle class, background. They went through treatment, and quite frankly, they were in there. Maybe they had a positive experience, and they found out that you can make a hell of a lot of money. Running one of these treatment programs. Because just to give your viewers an idea of what we're talking about from a profitability standpoint, I've worked in management consultancy my entire adult life, basically. And most, whether it's an aerospace and defense company or, whatever, most even tech companies, what's considered like a very good profit margin is, anything above like 5 to 10%, you're considered like really crushing it. Most of these treatment programs are operating on like 30 to 40% profit margins. So they're extremely profitable organizations. So one would think that the level and the efficacy of the care that they were administering would, sort of meet up to that. But unfortunately, it's anything but the case. And now that private equity companies have sort of hopped into the pool, it's just turned into like a $30+ billion a year industry. And another kind of fun fact for yourself and listeners is that so in the United States, about 3 to 5%, depending on the figures that you look at, is what we spend on behavioral health and addiction care. So out of the total healthcare budget, which is like close to $4 trillion, we about 3, maybe 5%, depending on how you carve it up, goes to is what we spend on mental health and substance abuse disorder.
Yeah.
But that 3 to 5% of all healthcare spending makes up for almost 20% of all healthcare fraud across the entire healthcare industry.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So this like little rinky-dink tiny sector of healthcare is
it's taken all our money.
Yeah, it's driving about close to 20% of all of the fraud.
Yeah, because we
in
pay
the
for
healthcare
that.
industry.
Everybody pays for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why, so with families and all that, when people talk about it, I'm like, look, I'm sure your healthcare premiums went up just as much as mine
did last year. You might as well be handing the money over to Bob. Just eliminate the middleman, just give him the money.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you should just sign those checks to Bob himself.
I always give the guests the last word if they want to say something to our listener, something I might have missed.
No, Bob, I really want to thank you so much for a really engaging conversation and lots of great questions.
Thank you
and I just really enjoyed this.
Yeah, I enjoyed it as well. There's so many problems, so I guess I'll be on the air for a while because, I had no idea it was such a big problem. We have a long way to go, Cory. I don't know how to get there, but this is the first step. I mean, it's terrible. Children are, the whole deal. I mean, they're everything, and we can't just let them die out. They die out at 12 and they're finished, and who knows what. I mean, they go into all these programs or foster care and all that stuff, and they're done. They become a burden to society. And like you said,
or they
we have to pay for them.
The equivalent of institutionalized, where you're just, they have to be in these facilities. And I mean, I completely agree.
We have to do something. And this is what the show is all about. That's why I immediately said, come on the show, because we have an emergency that nobody realizes. Everybody's like, well, it's Christmas. Let's go get some gifts or something. No, let's pay attention to our country and how bad things are for certain people or a lot of people. Let's do something that makes some sense instead of, I don't know, worrying about your grass. It just, I had no help. And these people, these kids, they had nothing. You had nothing. You pulled yourself up, but what about the kids that didn't? They're shocked that this kid shot up the movie theater. They're shocked. Why would he do that? Well, he's crazy. All right. But you live a life of torture and see how good you do. I mean, we need help in this area, in mental health. Mental health is everything. And if we don't pay attention to it right now, will we have it tomorrow? Is the question.
That's a great, that's a great point. And, I think if there's one thing that we can all kind of unite around and about is, if we are going to protect anybody, I think it should be the most vulnerable human beings in our population, which
we've seen how bad
mentally challenged kids.
We've seen Nazi Germany and we see it in Africa. We see how bad it can really get. Do we want that here? Do we want it to get that bad here? Because it can. There's nothing, I talk to people, it can't happen in the USA. Yes, it can. Why? Who's stopping it? Yeah. So we got to do a lot of work. There's a lot of work that has to be done in mental health, and that's why I'm on the air. But I really appreciate your time, and, this was fantastic, and maybe we could talk again and just, have.
Anytime, Bob. And you have my number. I've got yours, so please reach out. And thanks again for, all that you do and the mission that you have, because it's so important for platforms like this to exist.
All right. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you, Bob. Have a great day.
Bye.